Let the record show, for the benefit of every species in the galactic congregation, that the Vrathi were warned. Not once, not twice. 3 times, the Council of Aligned Worlds sent formal notices to the Vrathi High Command, printed on official golden membrane and sealed with the crest of 7 civilizations. 3 times, Admiral Scale of the Vrathi Empire crumpled those notices into a ball, tossed them into a waste disposal unit, and laughed. That horrible, wet, clicking laugh his species was infamous for across the known galaxy. Scale was not laughing now. But let us not get ahead of ourselves, because this story, like all truly spectacular disasters, began with someone believing they were far smarter than they actually were. The Vrathi were a proud species, tall, armored in natural chitin, with 4 arms and eyes the color of dying stars. They had conquered 11 systems, enslaved 4 civilizations, and strip-mined 3 planets down to their molten cores just to prove a point. By every measurable standard, they were terrifying, and they had just made the single worst decision in recorded galactic history. They had taken a human child. Now, before you rush to conclusions, understand this. The Vrathi strategy was not random. In their own minds, it was brilliant. The humans had recently joined the galactic congregation, and the Vrathi needed leverage. Something to hold over the heads of that stubborn, pink, bizarrely confident little species that had somehow waltzed into galactic politics and immediately started asking the kinds of questions nobody else had dared to ask for centuries. Questions like, why does the Vrathi Empire get 3 seats on the council and we only get 1? Or, excuse me, but who approved the taxation protocol on outer belt shipping lanes? Because the math does not add up. And most dangerously of all, has anyone actually read the original congregation charter? Because Article 14 is being completely ignored, and I would very much like to speak to whoever is in charge of enforcement. The Vrathi, understandably, found this exhausting, so they devised a plan. They would take 1 small human, just 1, a child, specifically because across most known species, children are considered precious. Their safety tend to make adults cooperative. What Scale did not know, what none of the Vrathi had bothered to research, was one deeply important fact about human children. They are absolutely, completely, magnificently unhinged. The child's name was Cody Varen, 8 years old, brown hair that refused to lie flat under any circumstances, a gap between his 2 front teeth, a collection of small rocks in his pockets at all times, for reasons even his parents could not fully explain. His school teachers had diplomatically described him in official reports as a force of nature for which we do not yet possess adequate vocabulary. Cody had been taken from docking port C on Station Helix, 7 while his parents filed customs paperwork inside. It had taken the Vrathi extraction team exactly 40 seconds to secure him. It took Cody exactly 41 seconds to start asking questions. "Where are we going?" he asked, dangling from the grip of a 7-foot armored alien soldier, with approximately 0 fear in his voice. The soldier, whose name was Drith, and who had successfully intimidated beings 3 times his size on 4 separate occasions, did not respond. He had been trained not to engage with hostages. "Is this a spaceship?" Cody continued. "Silence. It smells like a wet dog in here. Do you have dogs? What do you eat? Are those real claws, or like armor claws? Can I touch one? What's your name? Do you have a name?" "I'm Cody. My dad says I talk too much, but my mom says it's because I'm curious, and that curiosity is a gift." "Do you think curiosity is a gift?" Drith placed Cody inside the containment cell, stepped back, sealed the door, and immediately submitted a request for reassignment. The request was denied. From the command deck, Admiral Scale watched the entire exchange through surveillance feed. He made a note to award Drith a bonus. Then he made a second note, which simply read, "The child is unusual." He had no idea, because inside that polished alien containment cell, Cody Varen slowly looked around at the glowing walls and humming energy barriers. He reached into his pocket, pulled out one of his rocks, turned it over thoughtfully in his hand, and said, to absolutely no one in particular, "Okay, cool." Then he smiled. There is an old saying among the Vrathi. A caged animal fears its captor. It is a saying they repeat often, usually while standing in front of said cage, looking intimidating. It had served them well for centuries. What nobody ever thought to add was the necessary clause. Unless the animal is 8 years old, human, and has already figured out that the ventilation shaft above its cell is just wide enough to crawl through. By the 3rd hour of captivity, Cody Varen had accomplished 4 things. First, he had mapped the entire ventilation system of Deck C using nothing but his ears and a pebble he dropped at various intersections to measure how the echo changed. Second, he had befriended the food delivery drone by speaking to it continuously until it began blinking its lights in what could only be interpreted as nervous affection. Third, he had removed a panel from the interior wall of his containment cell using a rock, his thumbnail, and what Drith later described in his incident report as an unreasonable amount of patience for someone of his age. And fourth, he had located the communications relay junction behind that panel. He did not touch it, not because he could not understand it, but because, as he whispered very seriously to himself, not yet. Admiral Scale received Drith's report with a sensation he had not experienced since the Battle of Orin Rift. It was not quite fear. It was something adjacent to fear, something that lived next door to fear and occasionally borrowed its tools. It was the dawning realization that a mistake had been made, and that the full cost of that mistake had not yet arrived. He decided to speak to the child directly. His second-in-command, Vetra, quietly suggested this was a catastrophic miscalculation. Scale told her to be silent. Vetra recorded the date and time in her personal log under the heading, "Events I attempted to prevent." Scale stood outside the containment cell, straightened his battle sash, activated the intercom, and spoke in his most commanding tone. "Human child, you are a guest of the Vrathi Empire. Your cooperation will ensure your comfort. Your parents will be contacted with our terms shortly." There was a pause. Then Cody's voice came through the speaker, bright, calm, completely unbothered. "Cool. Hey, did you know your ship has a coolant leak in Corridor 7? I could smell it from in here. My uncle fixes engines. That smell means the secondary seal is failing. You should fix it before it reaches the pressure regulator or the whole deck vents." Silence. Across the command deck, Vetra slowly lifted her gaze. Scale stared at the intercom. All 4 of his hands were perfectly still. A maintenance crew was dispatched. They found a coolant leak exactly where the child had described it. The secondary seal was indeed failing. Had it reached the pressure regulator, Deck C would have vented in a vacuum. Scale lowered himself into his command chair. He sat there for a very long time. Then he asked very quietly, "What is this creature?" Meanwhile, Cody had entered Phase 2. Phase 2 existed entirely inside his head. He had not informed anyone about Phase 2, not even the food drone, whom he had officially named Gerald. Cody's mother worked in deep-range signal routing for the congregation's communications authority. He had grown up watching her work. He had asked questions constantly, every single day, and she had answered them because she understood something vital. Her son absorbed information like a dry sponge absorbs water. Cody connected 3 wires, rerouted a relay channel, accessed the emergency frequency used by congregation vessels, and transmitted a message 11 words long. "This is Cody Varen. I am on a Vrathi warship. Come get me." He paused, then added, "Also, they have a coolant leak, but I told them." The nearest congregation patrol vessel responded in 4 minutes. Captain Ona Brisk of the patrol ship Relentless would later describe receiving the transmission as the strangest, most wonderful, and most deeply terrifying moment of my entire career. What followed was not technically a rescue. It was more accurate to call it a retrieval. By the time Relentless docked under full weapons lock, Cody had already exited his cell, tapped Gerald goodbye on his sensor panel, and was sitting casually in the corridor outside, eating a ration bar he had negotiated from a stunned Vrathi guard through what that guard later described as 30 uninterrupted minutes of conversation I still do not fully understand. Drith escorted him to the docking bay personally, not because he had been ordered to, but because by that point, following Cody was significantly easier than attempting to restrain him. When Captain Brisk stepped through the airlock and saw the child, ration bar in hand, rock collection bulging from his pockets, she stopped. "Are you all right?" she asked. Cody shrugged. "Yeah, their food's kind of bad, though." Admiral Scale surrendered his vessel without firing a single shot. The Council later debated whether this constituted a military victory for humanity. The humans stated that the classification was irrelevant. What mattered was this. Article 14 of the Congregation Charter would now be enforced. Scale had agreed to extensive concessions during the negotiations. Most of those terms had been drafted, remarkably, by Cody's mother in the 6 hours between receiving her son's signal and arriving at the scene with 3 congregation warships, and an expression on her face that caused Scale to reevaluate every decision of his life. The record shows the Vrathi were warned 3 times, on golden membrane, with official seals. There should have been a 4th warning. It would have been much shorter. Do not touch the human child. It would have saved the galaxy a great deal of trouble. And somewhere in the galaxy, a different empire was already watching, and they made the same mistake.